Thank you for your interest in joining me for part two of Bumblebees in My Backyard. I'm going to get into a little bit of detail on the life cycle. Then we'll look at the distribution and talk about a few of the bumblebees that I've encountered that you'll find in different parts of the country. All right, so the colony life cycle begins with the queen emerging from under the duff or into the soil in the spring. And she is going to feed on nectar and pollen because with that nectar, she needs about 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 C for her flight muscles. The nectar will give her that energy for flight, and the pollen helps with ovary development and also to stimulate egg production. And early on in the spring, it's really tough because there's not much flowering. Here on the left, you're seeing a tricolor bumblebee queen, and she's feeding on crocus, a European or North African plant. So early on, it's very tough. Here in northern Maine, this is an April shot, so that is really early for her. And then finally in May, I have willow, the shrub, more like a small tree flowering. And I've also seen by this time in May dandelions, and earlier I'll have in warm sites a coltsfoot, which the flower looks a lot like a dandelion, but it has a thicker stalk. So the queen is going to start seeking a nest. She'll fly along the ground and investigate all kinds of places. She'll be very low, going back and forth. She'll be looking at rodent holes and logs and grass tufts. And here you can see a picture in the woods in May. There's a little bit of green up. And here is, again, another tricolor bumblebee searching out different sites. I was lucky to catch her investigating. She flew on from here, but this will show you in May just one example of what she might be looking at. So when she does find a nest, she will start to build her colony using discarded materials. They love rodent nests, right? And so because there's already stuffing there, but she may go into grass tufts or rotten logs. She may actually bring a little bit of material into the nest to build her colony, but really it's going to be a small amount. And then what she's going to do at this point, oh, and I should mention that these rodent holes, will usually be 1 to 3 feet deep, which gives them a little bit of insulation. So here on the left, you can see a tricolor bumblebee. Here is the tibia is in the middle of the picture, top left. You can see the indentation on that. So this is early on. It's actually, I think both of these photos were the beginning of June. I think this one on the left was June 2nd, and the one on the right was like the 7th of June. And I'm in northern Maine, and here you can see a wild blueberry flower. The queen is not collecting pollen at this point, which kind of indicates to me that she has not found a nest or started to build her colony. But you can see the corbicula surrounded by hairs on the tibia of her left hind leg. On the right, and this is in my blueberry patch in my backyard. You can see that she's collecting the bright yellow pollen from blueberry, which indicates to me that she is starting to establish a colony. And what she will do then is, in building her nest, she's going to continue to eat nectar and collect nectar and pollen and bring that back. And she's going to then build a honey pot, and she'll use wax from her abdomen to build this wax and honey pot, which she will fill with nectar. She's going to build a pollen ball by stuffing pollen together and then using nectar and her saliva to coat that. There's a lot of thought that the saliva contains antibiotic properties. And then at that point, when this is built, she's going to lay 4 to 16 eggs in a clump on that ball. Those eggs are pearly white. They're about 2.5 to 4 millimeters in size. And then she's going to sit on those and incubate them at 86 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes about 4 days for them to hatch. It is possible that she may be holding 2,000 eggs total. And anyway, what's important is that in about 4 days, those eggs will hatch. Now, those eggs, if they get cooled down, because if she runs out of nectar, she's going to have to leave to get more nectar. As she leaves, those eggs can cool and it will stunt the growth. And there's estimates that she may require up to 6,000 flowers per day of nectar to maintain the brood heat for those eggs. So that's quite interesting. Now, what's going to happen is once those larvae hatch, they're going to begin to feed on the pollen over about a 2-week period. And these white grubs, they don't move very far. They don't have any eyes. They're really just like an eating machine. And after that 2-week period, then they're going to go into pupation for about 2 weeks, until eventually, after that period, adult workers will emerge. So the eggs hatch, they feed on the pollen ball, and in about 2 weeks, the larvae pupate. They will make like a silken cocoon. So the workers that are emerging are coming from fertilized eggs, which means that they're generating female workers, and they emerge. Some of them will go out to forage for nectar and pollen. Others will help tend the young and the queen. The first workers are going to be really small because she's done all the work herself. And really, as an adult, these workers will probably live for about a month. So the unfertilized eggs will be drones, or will be the males that will come out later in the season. And here in this illustration, by the way, thank you to Dr. Jeremy Hemberger for generously allowing me to use his graphics to illustrate that. You can see a link to his website here, but I'm very appreciative for that. It was very generous. So anyway, as you get more and more workers helping to build pollen balls and to tend the queen and the young, she can concentrate on laying eggs and incubating. So the colony will grow, and the workers are doing a lot of care for the queen and the young as well. Here's an image from Wikipedia of a nest. You can see it looks a little disorganized. You can almost see like the coating. I have to tell you, I've not been able to see, or I really haven't wanted to dig up a nest to destroy it. So anyway, I'm relying on what I've seen others illustrate. But down on the bottom of this image, you can see some honey pots, and you can see workers, and I'm not sure where the queen is. I'm not sure, but I think these white features may be the pupa, but I can't be 100% on that. So I apologize. Later in the season, what's going to happen is the males and the future queens, which are called gynes, are produced. Again, the males only have half the genetic material. They're unfertilized eggs, and they're going to go out and they're going to either fly patrols, or they're going to perch themselves looking for a female. They find a female, they'll mate with the female. The mating takes anywhere from 10 to 80 minutes. And then what that does is it allows the sperm to harden and prevents other males from mating success. And during this time, of course, they're vulnerable to predation. So I've read that the prime mating age is about 6 to 10 days after the queens emerge. And the queens will go back, if they haven't mated, they'll be going back into the colony. They'll be out feeding, and the males will never go back into the colony. They'll be really just hanging out, feeding, and waiting to mate. And they mate only once. And then, of course, when the queens are mated and they're well fed, they're going to go into the soil, a couple inches into the soil, and overwinter in there, and that ends that year. So the queens are going to be living for a little bit over a year, but the workers will only last, well, they have about a 2-month life cycle. And here's a shot that I took on a sunflower in my backyard, and you can see these are all males hanging out. This is October. I had a couple, usually up here in northern Maine, we get frost in September, but in October you can see I've had a couple of light frost, and some of these males look like they're expired, but there are a couple that were still moving when it warmed up during the day. Okay, that takes me to the next part of my talk, which is about the distribution and diversity. And I want to thank Dr. Paul Williams and the trustees of the Natural History Museum in London for allowing me to use this graphic, which is the distribution of bumblebees. And if you look at this white circle in the top left of the illustration, you'll see 70, and that's the number of species of bumblebee that were found. And because of this, they believe that this is kind of the origin of the Tibetan plateau, where bumblebees may have evolved over 100 million years ago from wasp and have spread out east and west and into the Americas and down, so that really in the southern hemisphere, it's mostly just South America that has bumblebees. And again, bumblebees, I believe I said this in the first lecture, really are those of more temperate climates, montane or mountain environments going all the way up to the Arctic. There are about 20,000 species of bees, only about 250 species of bombus. Again, bombus is the Latin genus, the genus name for bumblebees. But this illustration kind of shows you their distribution kind of in a raster or grid format. In North America, we have 48 species of bumblebees north of Mexico, about 33 east of the Rockies. And there are a lot of bumblebee atlas projects across the country. I was not able to do an exhaustive study, but and I did not investigate our neighbors in Canada. Sorry, Canadians, I didn't mean to be rude. But in the United States, I found at least 28 bumblebee atlas projects. The majority of those are affiliated with the Xerces Society, but there's at least 4 or 5 states that did their own projects with federal and state monies, and universities. Also, there's a number of projects that aren't necessarily atlas projects, like in Arizona and East Texas. There's several universities that teamed up to look at bumblebee pollinator populations, not just bumblebees, but pollinator populations. A lot of states are doing that. Michigan has their own project that just started a year or two ago, 2021, I believe, or 2022. And if you go to their website, which I have at the end, they have some fantastic resources. So check that out. But in East Texas, researchers found that the American bumblebee is alive and well there in East Texas. And so also go to Arizona. They offer a course every year on pollinators and bees. So check that out as well. I want to talk about the Maine Bumblebee Atlas. I was a volunteer at this, one of many people that volunteered. I live at the top of the map here in the St. John Valley. There's a couple out in Van Buren who have done an enormous amount of sampling. But anyway, recent studies since 2000 have shown that we have 17 species statewide. And what I thought I would do is show you a couple of them, a couple of which are widely distributed throughout the country as well. So from 2017 sample, these are the 5 most sampled bumblebees in the St. John Valley. I think it topped out about 160 some for the half-black bumblebee. I apologize. This is on the top left image. I apologize. This is the only decent photo I have of this. Second, I believe, was the tricolor with about 144 bumblebees. And then you can see the others. The 5th most common sampled was the common eastern bumblebee that you see on the top right. Again, this is the one that's reared. Not this particular one, but this species is reared and sold to growers in greenhouses and blueberry fields and such. Bottom left was the yellow banded, and then the northern amber bumblebees. So all these are quite interesting. For example, the common eastern bumblebee on the top right here, they can have colonies up to 400 individuals. So they can get pretty large colonies. I have seen this bumblebee every year since I have been observing bumblebees since about 2017, my involvement with the Maine Bumblebee Atlas. And the tricolor bumblebee, I see that every year as well. They seem to I thought they would come out later, but I found that queen in April, the end of April, which startled me. What's interesting about the tricolor bumblebee, the common eastern bumblebee also, the males do the patrol. So they may be dropping pheromones to attract females and they patrol an area. The tricolor, however, will only have colonies up to about 200 individuals. The northern amber bumblebee that you see on the bottom right, that northern amber bumblebee, the males don't patrol. What they do is they'll fly to find another colony and kind of sit out there waiting for some females. The common eastern bumblebee you're going to see widely distributed across the east. And I want to show you a couple from that are also more widely distributed elsewhere. So here are 2 bumblebees that many of you may have seen, especially on the West Coast. The Vosnesensky, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I believe people call this the yellow-faced bumblebee. Of course, you can't see its face buried, but you see that single band on its abdomen, light-colored band. This is on an ornamental spirea. I captured this in McMinnville, Oregon, and I've seen this bee in northern Idaho and along the Columbia River Gorge. So this is really a West Coast bee. But anyway, I thought you might find that interesting and some really unique colorations. On the right is what I believe to be a brown belted bumblebee. If so, this is one of the most widely distributed bees all across the United States. And here, this is in Illinois on a milkweed flower. So beautiful bee, very widely distributed. Many of you may have seen this. There are a number of insects that look like bumblebees. So on the left, you can see the common eastern bumblebee. In the middle is a clearwing moth. Most moths and butterflies, you think of having scales on their wings. This one does not, and it's obviously got a lot of hair. But notice the antennae, almost club-like antennae that you see on moths. On the top right is a fly. In fact, when I was photographing this, I thought it was a bumblebee. This is on my linden tree in my yard. And then when I zoomed in and I saw these bulging eyes, and it only has one pair of wings, all flies only have one pair of wings. They have these very distinct antennae that you can't see here. They're kind of a little stubby antennae, kind of two-part antennae, but their eyes are bulging. And you can see that this is clearly unlike the head and the eyes of the true bumblebee that you see on the left. Another bee that's almost as big or is as big as a bumblebee is the carpenter bees. We don't have them here in northern Maine, but elsewhere I'm sure they're a nuisance for a lot of you because they chew into wood to make to rear their young in wood holes, but their abdomen is not devoid of hair, but it's not as hairy as a bumblebee. And there's also a little patch on the front of their head, on their face. So that's a carpenter bee that's easily misidentified as a bumblebee. They are also nectar feeders, and they are a bee, so they're vegetarian, but they are not bumblebees. So with that, I'll say thank you for listening. Here are a number of resources, including the Michigan Bumblebee Inventory. I want to thank Oregon State University Extension and the Bee Lab. They have been very generous to all of us for offering short courses on bees, pollinators, bumblebees in particular. And I put the links down here. If you want to hear some bee experts talk about life cycle and other things related to bumblebees and other pollinators, check out their resources, including their posted lectures. And then at the bottom, I put the reference to the Museum of Natural History, so you can read that interesting article on Bombus on their webpage. So with that, I thank you very much. My next talk will be on part 3, which will be a little bit shorter, but I'll talk about some of the things we can do for bumblebees that are very simple. And I'll show you how I created a bee yard in my backyard and the success that I have with that. With that, thank you very much.